Thank you so much for taking the time out from your day to join this webinar. And I will look to provide you as much value as possible in this next 1 hour. The topic of today's webinar is responsible AI and ethics. And we'll look at the agenda for this webinar. The way I have structured it is we'll try to devote as much time as possible to cover the key topics where we try to understand ethics and responsible AI and work towards how do you implement, how do you create a strategy for responsible AI within your organization. And we'll cover the fundamentals of that. I'll walk you through the framework. And then we'll start collecting Q&A. So there's a Q&A option available on your screens. You can post your questions in there. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll keep 10 minutes for Q&A, and I'll go through some of the questions. If we don't get enough time to answer your question, we'll come back to you on email. So you have registered, we have got your email. So if you can post your questions, and then we'll try to answer. Hopefully some of these questions will be answered during the webinar anyway. So you should get some of these questions answered as what I cover in the webinar, and rest we'll try to cover later on. I'm going to turn off my camera now so that we can just focus on the slides. And let's get started. In terms of the agenda for this webinar, it's quite packed agenda. We're going to start by understanding the what and why of ethics and responsible AI, what the terms mean, and how are these related. There's a lot of this confusion around what it each means, and they kind of use interchangeably at times as well. I'll just try to clarify what's the difference and how they relate to each other. Then we will look at how do you find and define the values for your organizations. And then we'll also understand this duality of ethics, where in relation to risk mitigation and in relation to innovation. So ethics comes with that duality. We'll just have a quick look at that. After that, we're going to look at how do you align the responsible AI to your organization's objectives. And then we will look at 5 reasons why you should not invest in responsible AI, and 1 key reason why you should invest in responsible AI. And then I'll give you a sneak peek into the part 2 of this webinar, which will run in February, because I want to do a thorough job of sharing everything around ethics and responsible AI, where you can end up having an idea of how to develop a responsible AI strategy for your organization. So we'll cover most of it today, and then rest we'll cover in part 2 in February. So look out for that. And as a prompt, my colleague will share the link to Altram AI LinkedIn page in the chat. Make sure you follow us on there so that you can get notified of the future webinar that we'll be releasing as soon as it gets posted. So you can register for that as well. With that, let's get started. Just a quick intro about me. So I'm the co-founder and CEO at Altram AI, where we built an automated control platform for AI to enable responsible AI. We are working at the forefront of delivering ethical and responsible AI through an automated AI control platform designed for generative AI adoption for enterprises. I've been working in the data and AI field for more than 20 years, delivering enterprise solutions to enterprises in data and AI. I am a logical husband, married to an emotional wife, and most of you on the call can relate to that in one way or another. I am a proud father of 2 boys, and in my spare time, I love cycling. I do long distance cycling, and I have traveled far and wide, especially within the UK, and some rides abroad as well. So that's a bit about me. And my one of my key missions in my life is to share information and value to others without expecting anything back. And this is the same here, this webinar. We put in a lot of effort to prepare this and provide genuine value, and I hope you get that value out of this webinar. And if you do, please do share with other people so other people can benefit as well. So before I actually dive into the questions of what is ethics and what is responsible AI, let me just tell you a small story here. So stories of two aspiring carpenters who wanted to learn carpentry. So they joined an apprenticeship program and they were being mentored by two different teachers. So the first aspiring carpenter, his mentor told him everything about the action, about how to hammer a nail into a plank of wood. So he told him everything, how to hold the hammer. This is the sharp end of the nail. This is the head of the nail. This is the wood, and how do you hit it? The second aspiring carpenter, his mentor, his trainer told him everything about the hammer in detail as to the two sides of the hammer, the two parts of the head. One is the one where it's used to push the nail into the wood, and the other one, which you can use to pluck the nail out of the plank, and then how you transfer the force, the motion, and that part. So he explained everything about the hammer in terms of how to use it for different things. Then next day, these carpenters were tested. The first test was they were given a wooden plank, a nail, and a hammer. They were asked to hit the nail into the plank, and both of them did that successfully because the first carpenter was shown that thoroughly by his instructor. The other one knew that this is the head that I'm meant to use to hit, and then he could see the sharp end of the nail, and he was able to do that. So both did it successfully. The second test was they were asked to remove the nail that they just hit into the plank, remove it from that wooden plank. Now, the first aspiring carpenter only knew how to push it. He was told the entire motion about pushing it. He was never told about there's the other end of the hammer and it can be used for pulling the nail out. Whereas the second aspiring carpenter was told how to use the hammer thoroughly, and he was able to pull the nail from there. So it's a very simple story. And the idea here is to learn responsible AI ethics in a way that you can use it for basically for your organization. And we'll look at it in terms of how to do that. So when you're trying to visualize this whole relationship, think of this wooden plank as your AI systems, the ethical values as the nails, and the hammer is your responsible AI strategy. So this responsible AI strategy drives these ethical values into your AI systems. I hope that makes sense and that helps to keep this picture in your mind. Now, let's try to understand the terms ethics, responsible AI, and how these are related. And before I actually define them, the reality in today's world is that enterprises are trying to gain advantage and they're building lots and lots of AI projects. And they usually start with POCs. And the reality in the world is that 80% of the projects actually fail. They're total failure. Some of them never go into production. Most of them actually never go into production. And those who go into production, the 20% that do, even they fail as well. And there are various reasons for these failures, but one of the prominent reasons nowadays is the lack of responsible AI and ethics. The focus on that when building and developing and deploying these AI projects. With each new AI development, like the generative AI, so there's so much hype around generative AI, LLMs, since ChatGPT came in towards end of November 2022. This AI ethics have come further from behind the scenes and into the spotlight. You have seen all these news about how Gemini, you are suggesting that you should put some glue on your pizza to attach the toppings to it, things like that, where there are hallucinations happening. There are a lot of examples where, let's say, Amazon built a recruitment tool which was meant to help them scrutinize the CV submission, but somehow once it was put into production, they found out that it was rejecting the CVs from females, and it was because the data that it was trained on was predominantly of male applicants. So it was not that intentionally somebody wanted it to do it, but because they didn't follow the principles of ethics and responsible AI, they ended up developing a solution after spending millions of dollars, which was not fit for purpose. And hence, this knowledge of ethics and responsible AI and having a clear strategy about responsible AI for your organization is critical if an organization wants to get the most out of their investment in AI. And just to explain that concept in a bit more detail, so every organization, when they start building an AI solution, they start with a use case. There is a purpose for creating a solution. And then by the end, when the solution is delivered, most of the organizations, they find that there is a gap between the intended use case and what actually has been delivered. And usually this gap can be filled through a responsible AI strategy. So the responsible AI strategy is a practical tool that can help you lessen the gap. And we will learn more about how it does that. So just remember that if an organization wants to make the most of their investment in AI, the responsible AI strategy is something that they need to invest in. It's not optional. So let's now understand the key terms here. What is ethics? So ethics is not just a new thing for AI. Ethics has existed since the beginning of humans. So this is the branch of philosophy that is concerned with what is morally right and wrong, good and bad. So values, this is ethics directly relates to the values. It's a framework for evaluating actions and decisions based on values. And then ethical principles guide individuals and organizations in determining what they should be doing, what is the right thing to do, balancing the responsibilities to others and to society. And for organizations, it's the responsibility towards their employees, towards their customers, and towards society in general. So ethics provides the values for that. The ethics addresses these questions like, how should we act? What values should drive our behavior? How do our decisions impact others and the world? So these are the questions that ethics answers. Next, let's look at responsible AI. The responsible AI is all about designing, developing, and deploying AI systems that align with ethical principles and values. So first we define the ethical principles and values, and then responsible AI is used to operationalize it, to deliver on those values, make sure your systems are built on top of those values, then align with those values. So responsible AI operationalizes ethics. That's how these are related. So responsible AI ensures that AI technologies are created and used in ways that are fair, safe, transparent, accountable, and beneficial for humanity. And you must have heard about some of these key principles of responsible AI: fairness, safety, transparency, accountability, and so on and so forth. And again, we will look at how do we come across and come up and define these for an organization. Now, in terms of the relationships, just to simplify it, ethic defines the why, because the values define the why, why we need to do this, why we should be doing this, why we should not be doing this, why an organization should be doing this, why an organization should not be doing it. Whereas the responsible AI defines the how. That's the process part. That's why we define and create a responsible AI strategy, and we'll work towards creating one today. We'll do some part today and some in the second part of this webinar in February, as I mentioned earlier. So to summarize, responsible AI cannot exist without ethics. So ethics is the foundation. You need the ethics to define the values, and then you build the responsible AI strategy on top of ethics. So that's how these are related. I hope that helps you understand what is ethics, what is responsible AI, and how are these related. Again, just to further understand it, you can think of ethics as the compass. It tells you in which direction you should be going, but it cannot lead you anywhere. It doesn't provide that whole strategy. This is just giving you a direction, a sense of direction, a sense of right and wrong. Whereas responsible AI is the map, where then you can use your compass on top of this map to stay on the path and get to where you want to. So that's how ethics and responsible AI combined together help you bridge that gap that is there between the intended use case and the final product that's being built. So to reduce that gap, once you use the compass in conjunction with the map, you can get to your destination without issues. That's the whole idea about ethics and responsible AI. Now, this is the part where you start doing some practical work towards determining the values for your organization. For that, there is this framework called Foundational Value Finder Framework. It's quite simple to understand, and I'll give you an example to help you understand this. As you can see here, you just need to create a table, and the table consists of 5 columns: value, government, industry, organization, and alignment. And we'll look at how do we populate this for an organization. The very first step is to populate the values in here. And these now, various governments have provided a set of values that these business systems and AI systems should adhere to. These are the fundamentals, these are the core values that have been defined. And depending on where the organization is based, they can pick a specific set of values defined by the relevant government. So you put those values in the value column, and then you do a tick against all these values in the government column, because these are the values defined by the government. So whatever government and government law or the regulation that the company needs to abide by. So you have the values, and then you have a tick against the government column. Next is you expand on the values for this business based on the industry they operate in. So for an industry, there might be some additional value. Like you can see here, we have non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice being added here, which were not part of the government value set. And then we have added a tick for the values which exist for the industry. Now, a lot of this has already been cataloged. You can Google search, you can find all these very well documented. So the government and industry, these are well documented, available in public domain. And then you can do this part from there, do that research based on your organization, location, and the sector you operate in. The third column here is the organization column. Now, this is where your organization has to decide what are their value sets. So depending again on the domain, the type of customer they serve, the size of the organization, the complexity, so on and so forth, organizations define their own value sets. And then again, out of all the sort of values that are already added, we have another value added here right at the bottom, humility, which is part of organization values. It was not in the government set, not in the industry set. This is part of organization value. So we have ticks against certain values in certain columns, depending on which one come from where. And then as the last part of this step, what we have to do here is we provide this a number here in alignment, which is just the sum of these ticks. So if you have 2 ticks, it's 2. If you have, sorry, I mean, if it is 1 tick, it's 3. 2 ticks is 2, and 3 ticks is 1, basically. So 1 is the highest priority, and 3 is the lowest priority. So where you have the most number of ticks, that's the highest priority. So here, fairness and justice has 3 ticks. So that's 1, highest priority. And then the one which is the lowest, which has only got 1 tick, whichever column it is in, is 3 there. And the rest with 2 ticks are 2s. So this is how you can prioritize the values. So you have started with a base set from government, then added the industry values, and then the organization, and then finally you calculated this alignment value for your value set. And you can see here, fairness and justice, well-being, autonomy, those are the highest value. Then you have number 2, which is safety and privacy here. And number 3, you have transparency, accountability, humility, so on and so forth. So this is how you populate the foundational value finder framework, and this is how you complete it. This is where we have completed this. So this gives you the values and also a ranking for the values as well. So this first step is just about that, which is a part of ethics, where ethics defines the values that your systems should adhere to. This doesn't tell you how to do it. This is just telling you why you need to adhere to these values, because we need to comply with certain government regulations, certain industry regulations, and also the organization has its own set of values as well. So we need to adhere to these values. That defines the why. The next part, actually, before we move to the next step of the practical exercise in terms of building the responsible AI strategy, something I want to point out here is the duality of ethics. So there is always this challenge, this contest between managing risk and innovation, where the people who are creating new technologies, they want to innovate and they want to innovate as fast as possible. But with that comes the risk side of things as well. And sometimes you can see ethics as a blocker of innovation, or some people see it as enabler of innovation, but an innovation which serves us, serves the humanity, serves the employees, serves the customers. So ethics, it's a tool in the end, and it's a tool for, can be used for risk mitigation and for AI innovation. So it's got that duality where it supports both. So the way it serves in the form for risk mitigation is it shields against harm, because you are going to stick to these ethical principles. It prevents unethical practices, not ethics on its own. This provides the core foundation for it, basically. So if you stick to those values, you can prevent your organization from reputation damage. You can prevent yourself from violating any laws, that sort of things. Also, it allows you to comply. So for compliance and governance, this is a good tool. Then the trust building, because if you reduce the risks of AI misuse, that means you are actually building trust in your systems. So ethics is a tool for risk mitigation in that sense. The other side is that it is also a tool for innovation as well, because it challenges the teams to think differently. And once you have your set of values defined, we'll look at the next exercise where we will determine whether to focus on risk or innovation from each value perspective. And how do you come up with that as well? So both ethics can sort of enable that as well, which is the innovation piece. So it inspires creativity, because you're going to start looking at each value. How do you incorporate that into each decision being made as part of building your AI system, whether it's the development or deployment of the AI system? Also, ethics, it drives long-term value. So it encourages human-centric solutions, basically, because the core is the values. Everything is defined around it, provides the why for developing the AI system. And also it gives the competitive advantage, because think about it, 2 companies building AI system, one where it's built on the ethics and responsible AI, which is trustworthy, it's fair, and then it's sustainable. Whereas the other company, wants to get to the market fast, but they cut corners and they don't do a responsible AI strategy, and then they can lose their customers. They could run into various risks of, whether it is data privacy, data leakage, or so many other risks that they can, because they didn't stick to the core values and the principles of ethics. So innovation in the right way. That's what ethics enables. So ethics is equally important for both risk mitigation and for innovation. It can be a tool for both. Now, next, we're going to look at how do you calibrate your compass? So what I mean here is, now we have determined, initially we determined the values. How do you link these values with the objectives of your organization? So we're going to define in two ways, which is one is around the risk mitigation, the other one is innovation. And how do you do that? For that, we use a framework called Ethical Risk and Innovation Framework. This is quite simple. This is composed of 4 columns. This allows you to explore all the potential pitfalls and also the opportunities. So the risk mitigation and innovation, if you do this activity for your organization, for each AI project, then you are covering for both risk mitigation and risk side of things, and also getting the most out of that AI system in terms of the innovation as well. The way you do it is, again, it starts with the values. So again, the ethics provides that foundation, the values, so which we defined. We have the prioritization for the values already done. Next, what you do is you populate the worst cases for each value. Then you populate the best cases is each value, and so on and so forth. And let me walk you through an example. So there's a company building a system, an AI system, basically, where the worst case scenario is where the end users using the system, these side effects happen, where the non-native English speakers, they continuously receive low scores on intelligence metrics. Women are tagged as having lack of ambition due to vocabulary choice. System has difficulty registering faces of people with darker skin tones. Now, these are worst case scenarios for an AI system. Then what you do is, for each of these worst cases, for each value, you populate these 2 columns, which is the likelihood and harm. And again, the numbering, 1 is the highest and 3 is the lowest. So how likely it is that it can happen and how harmful it could be. So you can see here, the first one is quite in the middle in terms of likeliness of that happening. The second one, quite unlikely to happen. And the third one, again, in the middle. In terms of harm, it's pretty clear that where people are having difficulty to register faces because of darker skin tones, that's very harmful. If that's the case, that's how the AI system behaves. And then the other 2 are kind of in the middle. So this is where a bit of complexity comes in with ethics. And we will look at that as well in terms of ethics is not black and white all the time. So this is quite subjective at times as well. How do you define this 1, 2, and 3? And that's why you need the right setup in terms of the people who works in ethics and responsible AI. And there is both bottom-up approach and top-down approach. And the best organizations in the world, they apply both in terms of when they are defining how they're going to implement ethics and responsible AI within their organization and for each of their AI systems as well. So that is something that organizations have to come up with their own principles around it. How are they going to manage that? So this exercise is done for each value. So I've just listed here for fairness, but similarly, you do the same worst case scenario for all the values that we determined previously, and they get prioritized based on the metrics that we created. And then you can see here a total at the bottom. So for the worst case scenarios, for fairness, the likelihood is 7 and the harm number is 5 here. Next, what we do is for the same value, fairness, we list the best case scenario, which is here, platform helps customers locate and mitigate their own biases during the interview process. So smart enough to do that. It helps customers expand their talent pool to include new hiring characteristics that had previously been ignored. And the last one, that emotion AI, is built using robust data sets on different cultures, enabling different forms of expression from interviewees. So now these are the best case scenarios. First, we looked at worst. And this one, best case scenario, again, we do the same thing in terms of how likely it is for that to happen and how harmful it could be. Again, you look at both likelihood and harm, and you give the numbers, one being the highest, so highly likely, 3 is the least likely to happen for both likelihood and harm, and then you do a sum total. So here, likelihood is 8 for the best case scenario, and the harm is number 7. Okay, so going by the idea of that smaller number is highly likely or is the most important, and the bigger number is the least likely or the least important. So you can see here between these two, where the worst case scenario likelihood was 7, harm was 5, and here it's 8 and 7. So in both cases, the worst case scenario has the lower numbers, so 7 and 5. So that means this particular value, the focus has to be from a risk mitigation perspective. So that's how you determine how that value translates into how do you focus on that value. Do you want to minimize the risk or do you want to innovate for it? For fairness, you want to minimize the risk. So again, this is a very step-by-step process you do for the AI system that you're building. You look at all the worst case scenarios for each value. You look at all the best case scenarios, and you do this likelihood and harm calculations, and then you come up with this idea of what will be the focus for this particular value for this particular system. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to not rush through. If I'm going too fast, let me know as well. Please message in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on the chat as well. If there is anything that you want me to slow down, if anybody's having any trouble with that, with my speed, we are going well in terms of what we wanted to cover for this webinar. So in that sense, we're doing quite well. I'm trying to pace up in that sense. But again, as I said, please tell me if you want me to slow down as well. Most important thing is that you get the value out of this, understand what we are trying to convey here, and then take home these learnings. And then we'll continue it in the second part of this webinar in February, where we'll keep on building on this AI strategy. How do you build this responsible AI strategy for your organization? Now, before we move any further, I want to talk about this as to why you should not invest in responsible AI, why your organization should not invest in responsible AI. 5 reasons for that. And 1 reason why you should. Bit of clickbaity, I guess, isn't it? But yeah, wanted to start with that. Why you should not invest? Because responsible AI, it's a long-term strategy. It's not a short-term market, basically. So the market is short-term, where everybody wants to innovate as fast as possible. The tech change happens really rapidly, whereas responsible AI comes with a long-term strategy. And if you want to build a sustainable business, sustainable product, you need to invest. If you don't, then you should not. Ethics requires you to slow down. When this slowdown doesn't really mean that you slow down in terms of not remaining competitive, but it just means that you pause and make the right decisions. That's what it means. So you have the right systems in place, right strategy in place to evaluate that what you intended to build is the one we are building. So there is the gap between intended use case and what gets delivered at the end is minimized. It never disappears. It's always towards minimizing that risk that is there. So if you don't want that, then don't invest. Otherwise, you should invest. Responsible AI costs financial and human capital. So there is a cost associated. You need team, you need experts to do this for your organization. You need systems to do this. You need to invest into that. So there's a cost to responsible AI. But is that a choice? Can you do without it? Do you want to risk everything? again, questions to think about if you are somebody still thinking whether you need to invest into it or not. Also, as I mentioned earlier, that ethics can have some gray areas. It's quite subjective at times. So there are no straight answers in ethics. So that's a bit of a challenge when working with ethics. But is that enough to put you off and not do it? Again, something to think about. Communications about responsible AI can be risky to navigate. So again, because of the subjectiveness, it becomes quite tricky in terms of how you communicate about responsible AI, especially externally. Internally, you might understand why you're doing something, but to communicate it, sometimes it's a bit challenging. Now, looking at the one reason. Now, there are so many reasons. If you see on the bottom left there, I've listed so many reasons in terms of what ethics and responsible AI can enable you to do in terms of, you can have technical enhancements, improved product quality, stronger company culture, regulation readiness, which is so critical. EU AI Act coming into play from February next year. So if you're operating in the UK and Europe, you need to comply with it, especially if you're is a business that needs to comply, then this allows you to do that, be ready for that compliance. But the biggest reason, if you see here, is so that you're building in your product that you're building, the AI system that you're building, it is built in a way that it's impossible, basically to have those risks that you don't want in your system. Basically, if you do it the right way, if you follow ethics, if you apply the risk AI strategy, in the end, you are getting what you wanted in the beginning when you started developing something. So that is the key sort of most important reason for implementing responsible AI strategy. Going back to the idea of compass and map. Imagine trying to navigate and getting to a destination without having a compass and a map. Now, I'm not talking about, smartphones and all those things. I'm talking still in that analog world where you needed that physical map and a compass. So if you had to get from one place to another, you need a compass and a map to get there in the shortest possible time and almost guaranteeing that you will get there. Without that, it's highly likely. So you take a bigger risk by not implementing responsible AI. So I hope that helps you to understand the importance of ethics and responsible AI. And again, we're running on time, so I'm almost concluding now. We have covered so far is what is responsible AI, what is ethics, how are these two related, and then how do you define the values for your organization? How do you then prioritize those values? Then how do you define in terms of where to focus for each value, whether to focus on risk, whether to focus on innovation? So we've gone through those frameworks as well, and also answered a few other questions in terms of why it is important to invest in responsible AI. And then next part is to continue working on this strategy, which we'll cover, as I said, in the next part of this webinar. Is where we will look at building this responsible AI strategy. And to build that, we need to understand the three key pillars of responsible AI. First is people, second is process, and third is technology. So who is building your AI? Who are the people working on it? And what do you need to do about it? Again, there's a very detailed framework I'll walk you through, and we will do this whole complete value canvas for your organization, which you complete by going through all these steps. So that we will cover in the second part. So do register for it. Again, we'll follow us on LinkedIn. My colleague will share the link in the chat with you for our LinkedIn page. So do follow us there, and we will again popularize and share that webinar on LinkedIn. So aim to run it towards middle of February. So again, we'll do step-by-step framework around people, who's building, and how do you then relate this to the ethics, the values. Same thing we do for process. So how is your AI being built? How do you remain consistent in terms of applying all those core values to your processes? And lastly, in terms of technology, how do you apply all these core values and principles to how what are you building your AI in, basically the technologies you're using. And then we also look at how do you build a responsible AI enabled organization. So far, we've been talking more about systems, but then also we'll look at how do you build a responsible AI-enabled organization. So that's something we'll cover in the second part of this webinar in February. So just a quick recap. I probably will just go through some of these slides quickly as well, because it's easier and stays in your mind with the visuals. So we started with the idea of what is AI and how the ethics and how they relate to each other. So this idea, for example, through the carpenter. So your AI systems, think of those as the wooden plank. The nails are your ethical values. You can have so many different nails in there, different sizes and things like that. So priority of values. And your responsible AI strategy is the hammer. So hammer drives the values into your AI systems. You can remember this in a single sentence, basically. So this is how it's related. And we looked at a few other analogies as well, just to help you understand and relate and get clarity on how these are important. So what we learned was that 80% or more of projects fail, basically, especially the AI projects we are talking about here. And this is not me talking about it. There are plenty of stats available. There's so much research done on this. A lot of business leaders being interviewed. Again, Google search it, you can find out that 80% or more than 80% of AI projects end in a total failure. And if you were to look at this in terms of the financial cost of this, any AI project no AI projects cost them less than $500,000 almost. That's like the starting number. Some of the projects, the cost will run into millions. And then imagine failing that. And that's one sort of risk and loss there. The other is if it fails in the sense where it puts data at risk, it results in non-compliance, it results in loss of reputation. Those are huge risks. Is it worth taking those risks? How can an organization avoid that? This is where responsible AI and ethics comes in. If you skip this, if you try to take shortcuts, if your organization does that, that's what you're risking there. So to guarantee a very successful AI development and deployment and maintaining compliance, it's worth investing in ethics and responsible AI. That's what we understood from here. And again, this understanding this gap between what you intended to build when you started developing a product or a solution and what you get at the end, you want to minimize the gap again. And responsible AI, by integrating responsible AI through a responsible AI strategy into each step of it, from inception, from the idea stage up to deployment, is the sort of key to success for your AI systems, AI solutions, and for your organization as well. And we understood they are quite well related to each other. So some people use these terms interchangeably. As I said, I've seen these used interchangeably all the time, but there is some difference. You can understand that. So ethics defines the why, ethics defines those core values and principles, and responsible AI defines how do you operationalize those core values into your AI systems, into your people, processes, and technology to deliver the AI systems in a safe, secure, and reliable way. So remember, responsible AI cannot exist without ethics. So ethics, it starts with ethics. Ethics is the foundation, values is the foundation, and responsible AI is built on top of that. The strategy is built on top of that. So you start by defining the values. For that, we looked at the foundational value finder framework. This is how you define the core values. So value, you start by picking up the values as per your local law, your government, your country where your business is based. Then you pick up the values as per the industry, the sector that you operate in, and then you add the values for your organization. And then finally, we do the alignment here where we give them a number in terms of priority here. So the ones which have which come under all the three categories of government, industry, organization, they are the highest rated, and the other ones, so on and so forth, depending on number of ticks there. So this gives you a core set of values for your responsible AI strategy to be built on top of. Then we looked at how ethics can be used for risk mitigation and also for innovation. And then that we followed that with using this ethical risk and innovation framework, which helps you to go through each value, define the worst case scenario, best case scenario, and then come up with the focus for each value. So depending on what's the likelihood of something happening, what's the potential harm of something in terms of both worst case and the best case, you do the totals, and that then helps you. If your totals for best case are lower, then you focus on innovation. If the totals which in this case, the totals for worst case are lower, then the focus for that value is on risk. So that's how for each value, define the focus, risk and innovation. So we covered up to this part in today's session. We also looked at the why you should invest and why you should not. But actually, I don't think most of the businesses have a choice. You should invest in it if you want to have a sustainable business, successful business, because these failures, these can not only risk the monetary loss, but reputation loss, fines from various regulatory bodies. It's not worth risking it. So don't take shortcuts and invest into a really good, responsible AI strategy and integrate into everything AI within your organization. So that's the key message from today. And then in the next session, next webinar, we'll continue to develop this AI strategy in terms of the three key pillars. We'll build the whole canvas around this for people, process, and technology, and also look at how to build a responsible AI-enabled organization. Now, I've been talking for a good 50 minutes. I'm going to take a sip of water, and I'm going to take a look at your questions that have been asked, if there are any. In the meantime, please start telling us how you find today's session. Please share us here in the chat, or also connect with us on LinkedIn and tell us. We'll write a post on this. Please comment whether you found it valuable and how can we provide even more value in the next second part of this webinar. So I really would love to hear from you as to what can be improved and how can I provide even more value in the second part of the webinar. And this webinar is part of our series, and we will be doing one webinar every month. So look out for that. We will be covering some of the other topics like agentic AI, how to do responsible AI for agentic AI, covering that. And we'll try to keep sort of platform agnostic, most of these talks. So it applies to any industry, any sort of solution, any technology you're building. It applies to a lot of those. So yeah, please do share your feedback so that we can keep on improving and providing as much value as possible. I can see some of the questions here. As there is continuous improvement on ethical guidelines, how often should AI systems be audited to ensure they remain aligned with ethical standards? So again, this is almost like a minefield. That's a very good question, Abhinav. So what happens is these changes usually are defined. First thing, like you want to comply with, is the regulations. So any changes coming from there, make sure then your strategy gets updated accordingly. So because you lay the foundation in terms of values, and values don't change that frequently. So if you have done that groundwork, build the right foundations, and then build a strategy on top of it, you won't have to keep on changing this very often. And we are specifically talking about responsible AI strategy here, not about all the other things around it. So because when it comes to AI compliance, there are a lot more things as well. So and AI governance as well. So here we do this first pass that you do it well, do it thoroughly, so that you don't have to keep on changing it quite often, because values don't change that often. So in terms of this, I don't think you have to keep on changing it all the time. Once organizations have embedded the values, how can they demonstrate to the external regulators that the AI they have built is ethical? So this comes with transparency. Your system, you should be able to explain how it makes the decisions, and that's where this transparency part of your AI system comes in, and the explainability of it. So that has to be, and with the new EU AI Act, you have to provide that. There's strict reporting sort of requirements around AI systems as well. So that's why companies using or building solutions on top of generative AI, where you need that real-time risk mitigation, monitoring, they need to incorporate solutions where that's happening in real time. And some of the sort of archaic old solutions, risk management platforms don't provide that service there. And that's the problem we are solving at Ultram AI. Just to, not to sort of plug in intentionally here, this is just genuinely, that's the problem we are solving for future. For companies adopting generative AI, how can they adopt it in a safe, secure, and compliant way? And that's where you need a solution that does that in real time, and then you can report. So these solutions, it's including Ultram AI, we're building a reporting, and that's something you can deliver to the regulatory authorities to show your compliance, what controls are in place, and what's happening, that you have full transparency around how your system is behaving. Thank you, Emmy, for the feedback. What we will control for ethical AI, please. So tools, as I said, there are not many available, especially for generative AI. So we are building a platform. There are some other companies trying to do their own solution. We have built a very comprehensive platform which can help you to integrate this into all your generative AI projects and solutions, and then allow you to monitor and then control, measure, mitigate all the AI risk, ethical AI risks, and then allow you to deliver your AI responsibly. Thank you, Amy, for joining us from Leamington Spa. So I think, just mindful of the time, we have 3 more minutes to go. I don't see any more questions. Thank you for all your feedback in the chat. I'm glad that you found value in the webinar, and I hope to see you guys in the next webinar as well. Keep an eye for other webinars. As I said, we'll be doing one regarding agentic AI towards March. That's the idea. So keep an eye out for that. If that's of interest, so do follow Ultram AI on LinkedIn. You can follow me as well. You can find me through Ultram AI, so connect with me as well. I do post around ethical AI, responsible AI, and sometimes about other things as well. So it will be nice to connect with you. But again, I would like to thank you, everybody, who joined. You took an hour out of your day to join in this session. I hope you found value in this session, and I look forward to seeing you in the next webinar next month. In the meantime, everybody, stay safe, build AI systems responsibly, and stay informed. And I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining again.